Will we wait like 30 seconds?
Usually, I think we're good to get going, so we'll get started getting people on.
Just get going. Perfect. Well, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're tuning in from, as always, and thanks for joining Dan and I in our August DG community chat. I hope you enjoy this chat as the previous month's ones as well. As always, the chat has been recorded, so we will put it out across our social media channels after the event, so anyone who missed it can catch up later, and feel free to share it amongst your own platforms as well. And at the moment, if you're on LinkedIn, Twitter or YouTube, feel free to share this link as well so that people in your network can join in to the chat tonight. Too, but before we get into the kind of main bit of the chat, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to all those people who've commented and reshared and messaged Dan and I just about the DG community in general. It's so lovely to hear such nice feedback, and we don't do it for that reason at all. Of course we don't, but it's lovely to hear back what you think of the community events that we do, and hopefully the advice that we provide is helpful as well. So yeah, thank you so much. But we'll just dive into tonight's chat, which is going to be around daily habits, routine and opportunity, and I'll pass over to Dan, who will give a bit of an overview into it. But as ever, please feel free to use the chat box at the bottom and to ask any questions that you wish. It's an interactive chat as always, so please just put your questions in and Dan and I will get to them as soon as we can.
Thanks, Jodie. Good evening, everybody. So yeah, this conversation in a way came from a lot of the things that Jodie and I have talked about for quite a while, actually. And I think in the last DG community chat, we touched on these points in some of the questions that were asked from the audience. So yeah, the first thing I would say is please feel free, put the questions in the chat. We'll get to them as soon as we can, and I'm sure there'll be hopefully lots of interesting ones to have a discussion with. But what in prep as well for that Jodie and I were thinking about was, you know, I think the words habits and routines and opportunities are almost in a way buzzwords that a lot of people use to be able to talk about a lot of and a variety of different ideas. And when I obviously over a year ago now did a small sort of YouTube career set of chats and conversations, I talk quite a lot actually about habits, and the reason why is that because I think if we go back to the basics of a lot of the things, and partly the reason why some people want to join and listen into the conversations, etc., and talk about particular elements is, you know, a lot of the conversations are around, I want to do something that as a career which is interesting for me, that I'm passionate about, that I'm inquisitive on, that I want to learn more about. And the easy and the hard answer usually is, and it's something that I know Jodie will share quite a lot about soon, is, you know, if you want to make that investment and you want to try and control what you can control, in the short term, some of the things that I've seen worked very well is, you know, just starting almost like a knowledge side hustle. And what I mean by that and how it relates to habits in a way is that what I've said a lot of the time to people is, okay, so you want to be involved in the sports industry, for example. What particular area of the sports industry do you want to be in? If it's marketing, if it's PR, if it's comms, if it's accountancy, if it's law, if it's fashion, if it's design, if it's social media, what content, whatever else it might be. But the really important thing I think to be thinking about is two things. One, are you going along the career path that will take you in that direction? And at the same time, are you doing things outside of your 9 to 5 sometimes, which you think will aid your career trajectory, your career path? And usually, that tends to include trying to understand more about the industry that you want to actually get involved in. And in my experience too, and I can only speak on behalf of myself, but Jodie as well, because we've had these conversations for a while, is Jodie for a long time was saying, well, I'd like to be a sports lawyer and I'd like to get more into sports related work. And a lot of the conversations we had, and I'd said to her was, okay, well, how do you do that? By taking actual particular habits. And how do you make particular habits and turn those into routines? And the thing is a very, very granular, practical tip that I really tried to push Jodie and lots of other people towards was just to say, for 10 minutes or for 15 minutes every day, put aside time to be able to start reading things in your industry space that you are interested in knowing more about. A very, very simple element. So at that point, I was want to hand over to Jodie, because maybe you can talk about that journey of where you actually came from being a lawyer, a qualified lawyer that wasn't actually doing too much in sports, with the aim to get into sports, and how you started on those daily habits, which then effectively transformed into a relatively straightforward routine.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. Yeah, you're right. When I first wanted to get into the sports law sector, I actually knew nothing about it as such because I hadn't been exposed to it. So the first thing that I almost did was quickly, went onto Google, and as everyone does, what is sports law? What topics can I look into or whatnot? And actually, the very first thing that came up, and I know Dan's a huge advocate of this, is the Law and Sport website. And I clicked on that and I thought, oh wow, there's so much more to this than I ever thought, and there's just so many different sports and so many different elements of the sports law. And I thought, wow, so it's quite overwhelming actually when you realise there's a lot of something that you know nothing about. But then actually, I kind of just took it upon myself to just spend 10-15 minutes a day just looking. Particularly, I just looked at this one website for maybe a week or so, I think it was, just so I knew that there was a lot of resources there. And I didn't want to overwhelm myself too much by looking too many different other places. So I maybe spent 5-10 minutes a day and just going through, clicking on the links on Law and Sport, looking at the different sports that were there and just seeing what issues were current in those areas. And there were some blogs. I think Dan had a few blogs up there as well in the football sector. But there's a lot of different things, and actually just by reading that and the issues that were current actually exposed me to a lot more areas that I didn't even know I would have an interest in, because I just never read about them before. So things like anti-doping or corruption or commercial contracts or anything in any sport. And it was really good just to kind of spend 50 minutes of my day, and I didn't spend any longer than that because there was no point in trying to get too much information at once. But I usually did 10 minutes or 15 minutes in the morning, but you could do it at any point. And I kind of just began making myself do it every day, kind of at the same time, whether it would be morning or afternoon. But actually, after a week or so, I found myself just doing it as a habit. Like I just kind of logged in and I checked the Law and Sport website to see what was coming, what was new articles or whatnot, what was kind of there. And actually at the time, Dan had told me to kind of write a knowledge journal at the time, so the articles that I'd read or whatnot. And it wasn't even always articles about like sports as such. It was sometimes about sports lawyers' journeys in the industry, what top tips, so it was a wide range of things. And I wrote down the articles that I read and who had written them, and I made 3 points about the kind of 3 main factors that I'd taken away from the article. And actually, on the basis of that as well, I then reached out to, if I could, and I could find who wrote it, I then reached out to the person who had written it, probably on, I think it was mostly LinkedIn, because they were easier to find. And I just dropped them a message to say, I read your article, really interested in connecting and whatnot. And then because you had a common interest, i.e. you read their article, it was more likely to spark a conversation as well. So I just limited myself to three articles a day, and I didn't reach out to every single person. If I reached out to maybe 1 or 2 or 3, then that was fine. But there's no point in putting pressure on yourself either. Absolutely not. And then after a while, I collated a knowledge journal of a lot of different articles, a lot of different areas, and then so it was really good to be able to do that. But I think a tip for me, especially coming from a sector where I actually knew nothing about law, I qualified in civil litigation, so nothing to do with sport at all. I think the first step and the first hurdle you have to do is simply just have like a blank canvas almost, and then just Google something or sports law or whatever, and just see what takes your fancy, and just keep reading and just keep searching, but don't spend too long doing it. Just carry on with your your normal day otherwise. and then just kind of see what happens. But it's something that I still do today, even though I'm now in the sports law sector. It's still good to keep your hand in and to see what's kind of going around. But that would be my first step would be just to kind of open your mind and your eyes up to the articles and knowledge that are out there. Yeah, that'd be my first bit of advice.
No, I completely agree, Jodie. And I think obviously really interested in other people's views on this and questions that they have. And please feel free to put it in the chat. But I think a lot of the time, what I'm really keen on trying to push in particular directions is, in a way, and it's from the James Clear book that I know both of us have read, that we really enjoy at different times, in his social media posts at various other times as well, which is almost like you are your habits. And it might only be for 5 or 10 minutes, bit at a time. But if you want to do something, the truth is that unless you make time to be able to do it, then it doesn't really happen. But the flip side of that at the same time is that, if you keep with that habit, and as you said, for a particular period of time, that it becomes that routine, that it becomes quite automatic, it becomes that self-developmental element, then I think the really important thing that then happens by way of transformation is you start obviously realizing you've started consuming quite a lot of content. If it's a podcast, if it's something visual, if it's something reading, if it's speaking with someone in particular. But if you then multiply that and compound that over 3 to 6 months, and you've consumed, just say, a couple of articles a day, then what we're actually talking about is probably over 500 pieces of content over a 6-month period. And the reason why I say that is important is because things start then, I think, piecing together, is that you build a better 360-degree picture of the industry. If it's football, if it's sport, if it's fashion, if it's tech, if it's crypto, if it's whatever else it might be, and all of those linkages and connections, I think, start joining together a little bit. And one article that you've read about one thing links in with something else that you've written, and then you put it in a knowledge journal saying, actually, that bit is interesting for here, and this means it goes to here. And you start just connecting you start inputting pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, really, that look quite disparate in the beginning, but then 2 pieces link together, and then you start getting a bigger picture. And the reason why I say I think that's really important is because day by day, as you piece each particular knowledge piece together, it allows you then at some point to provide a more informed opinion and back it up, rather than, my usual one is I have a lot of people that say, I want to be a football agent, or I want to be in the football business. And then you say to them, okay, well, tell me about the interesting issues impacting on the football industry today. What you really want to be able to say about a particular industry is not, oh, I really like playing it, or I really like watching it. It's actually demonstrating to someone in the industry that when you have the opportunity to have a conversation with them, you can actually back it up with interesting insights. It might be the interesting insights of other people at first, but when that bits of knowledge congeals in lots of different ways, and you start forming opinions based on lots of other people's opinions, that's actually when the real magic starts. Because then what happens is you're speaking from a place of much greater authority, that you're not simply spouting off the same things that other people might be able to spout off, but you're much more likely to say something more perceptive and have greater perspective, rather than just superficially trying to bluff your way through a conversation press. And it's that invisible knowledge building which then becomes really important.
I think that's absolutely right. And I know some people find it easier than others to, engage in conversations or to impart the information or knowledge that they know, which is actually why I started a blog in the first place, because I'm not that confident. I mean, I know I'm doing this webinar series, but I'm that confident speaking in front of people. So with all the knowledge that I kind of learned, that I decided then to put it into a blog and then share it amongst my platform, and then people could kind of read what I was, evidencing what I was talking about. And that was something that I really enjoyed doing. But again, it was like outside of my comfort zone. But actually putting it down on paper, and then that also then allows you to develop your ideas, your opinions, and whatever else as well. And whether one person reads it or 10 people read it or 100 people read it, it doesn't matter. I think it's just good to get your thoughts and that out there. And actually, if you spend a bit of time, researching in a particular case or an area, someone else might not have. And actually, if you just share that on your platform and they read it, and then they'll be, you know, more up to speed with the current affairs on that. So actually it has a domino effect as well. So there's like something that I started off just reading the articles myself, and then as I built up knowledge about a particular area, I then felt comfortable enough to write about it myself and then share it amongst like my platforms as well. And that was a big thing for me, because I just never thought that anybody would ever want to read anything that I'd written. But I think I found that easier to begin with than speaking to people about it, because sometimes I just get really nervous or speak really fast or get tongue tied or whatnot. So I chose to go down the blog route, sorry, and yeah, it was just received quite well, unexpectedly.
Well, I think the important thing there, Jodie, as well, that I was really keen on stressing is, you know, getting out of your comfort zone and writing for the general world is not an easy thing to do. It's very difficult to write, you know, I can't even say the word, cohesively and cogently about actually a topic full stop. But I think that also really helps when you're trying to put across your personality in a CV as well, really, where you can say, actually, I've written on these 3 or 4 topics. It's almost so unlikely that someone that's wanting to recruit someone isn't going to click on a link and say, can this person write well? Can they put forward a good and interesting, perceptive piece of information? Can they articulate themselves well enough? And I think that, I know that's got me some way to some jobs previously as well, where I'd written law journal articles, and I'd asked, you know, the guys that I'd worked with for lots of years, saying, you know, what were the particular reasons why you hired me? And they said, well, you know, you obviously had good technical knowledge and skills because you'd been accepted to some law journals and had written, you know, well in different ways. And so, and I'm going slightly off tangent for 1 second, but I'd be really interested in your views on this as well, Jodie, because I think, you know, when I gave this some thought over the last few months about, you know, when people come to me and others, I'm sure yourself included, Jodie, and say, well, tell me how I prepare for an interview for a particular job, for example, in the industry or in the entertainment space or whatever else it might be. The truth is that to a degree, I almost feel like it's the wrong way around at looking at the actual question. Because actually, if you are engaged in wanting to understand more about a particular industry and the current issues that are cropping up and the interesting stuff and the particular commercials and what's happening and how things work, etc., is that I think to some people, even though it's obvious to say, the best people will already have probably spent 6 months or a year actually reading all about the stuff that they're interested in doing. Now, granted, I know it's not obvious to everybody, and it hadn't been for me for a long time to say, well, I need to read this or I need to read that. But preparing isn't the 1 week of worrying about, oh my God, I need to do this and this and this, because otherwise I won't know this, this and this. It's actually almost creating your identity as somebody that wants to know more about someone about the things that you're interested in most in doing, and then being able to articulate that in particular interviews. And the reason why I say that is there's a great quote again by James Clear. I'm just going to read it, that he put in one of his newsletters in the end of December 2020. So he wrote, he said, improvements are only temporary until they become a part of who you are. The goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to learn an instrument. The goal is to become a musician. This year, focus on the identity you want to build. And I really liked that, because actually that's what it is. The whole idea of being your habits and identifying yourself as someone that does those particular things. I think then you almost start thinking about at interview or before, you're identifying as someone that wants to be part of the industry because you are starting to build that knowledge and understanding. And I'd be really interested, Jodie, on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think it's a long-term thing as well. Like, it's not something. I mean, I've worked for a couple of years to get to where I am now, and it isn't something that just came overnight either. I realised that I didn't have necessarily all the skill sets that I needed to get into the industry, and I kept getting knockbacks, kept getting rejections, and it was mainly because you don't have enough experience in this area or X, Y, and Z. So I thought, well, actually, if that's what they're going to keep saying to me, and only I can change that, and actually by doing something or evidencing why I have an interest in the area, i.e. a blog or a link to the blog or whatever, if I was to put that in my CV or application for a job, prospective employers could click on that and see, actually, yeah, you know, I do have an interest in this. I've done this and I've done that and whatever else. And I did a lot of placements as well, and just a lot of you know, emails and whatnot. And we can probably cover that in another topic. And I don't want to stress. Oh, sorry. I want to stress that it's not easy at all. It's really difficult. And actually, doing a lot of these daily habits are really mundane. They're really boring. There's so many other things that I know everybody would rather be doing, you know, scrolling on social media or just doing whatever. I mean, it's easy enough to spend 15 minutes just sitting on the couch doing nothing than it is to spend 15 minutes, you know, having a quick look at a website that talks about sports law or whatever. But actually, it's the little things that you do every day that will then turn into the big things that will help you going forward. And that's ultimately kind of, I think, in the long term, what helped me get to where I am today. Like, nobody saw the hard work that I did. I couldn't evidence it until I had the job, or until I did things to, you know, step to get to where I'm going. But actually, right at the start, I genuinely started with nothing. I had a complete blank page. I didn't have necessarily any contacts in the industry. I didn't have anything. Like, I very much reached out to everyone. And for example, I reached out to Dan. Dan didn't reach out to me, and that's kind of how our relationship like started. But yeah, that's very much what I did. It was pretty much right at the start, complete blank canvas. And I thought, right, this is the long-term goal, is to work in the industry, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I had to break down things of how I thought I was going to get there, and then break it down again. Well, what can I do to get to A? What can I do then to get to B? And what can I do to get to C? So it's small steps that ultimately then lead to larger steps, or then larger steps then lead to, you know, you get higher up the ladder and whatever else. But actually, everyone's got to start somewhere, and by doing something is better than nothing. And whether that be 15 minutes a day reading an article, listening to a podcast when you're out on a walk, or whatever else. I mean, ultimately, you can't run a 5K either if you just, I mean, well, I definitely couldn't run a 5K just all off the back of never having run before. So you've got to have realistic expectations as well. And I know for some things like this happen overnight for people. I understand that. But I would say that's probably few and far between. I think actually the majority of people, it is a bit of a longer game. But actually doing little things, there are plenty of things that you can be doing every day or every other day that will help you, and no one else will do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. And as Dan said, actually, when you're preparing for an interview or you're applying for a job, you've already gone ahead and researched everything, and not because someone told you to do it. You already knew that's what you had to do. Like, you just go on. It's almost like automatic. You want to apply for a job, well, you go and research the company, you go and look at what they're doing and whatnot. And I think if you're having to ask somebody to do that, I would probably think about the area that you're looking to try and get into as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot that you can do, and certainly there's probably a lot more, or many people have probably done different things than what I've done. But I think it's helpful to just impart some of the steps that I took to get to where I am.
So Jodie, yeah, I'm going to just touch on one or two things out of that. But the first thing just to note on that, which I was really interested in, is that, you talked about your knowledge journal as well. And I actually, this is the first year that I've actually journaled and almost had a daily checklist of the things that I want to be doing, like reading, like exercising, like gratitude, like reading with the kids, listening to a podcast, doing my book stuff, all the things that I want to try and track a little bit. And I found that the accountability of having that tracker, in a way, as long as you can keep in the routine of it, is actually very helpful as well. That you almost get, annoyed at the fact that you don't do it if you then miss a couple of days or otherwise. So yeah, I think if I give you 1 or 2 minutes just to think about that, whilst I go on to another point about the accountability of that knowledge journal and how about you did it. What I just wanted to touch on was a really interesting TED talk that I watched a while back from a professor called BJ Fogg. So he gave this TED talk, right, about routines. And he's a very good storyteller in truth as well. So I'd really recommend having a listen to it. But he basically explained about his routine that he's developed, which is every time he goes to the toilet, he does 2 press-ups. So I found that quite odd in a number of ways, in truth, especially because I was querying about whether he washed his hands or not. That's maybe a different story. But, the point generally being is that he explained then that he wants to get fitter, he wants to get more in shape. But actually, he found difficult was continuing the motivation to go to the gym and to exercise day after day, week after week. And so what I was trying to work out, and what he then explained really nicely, was the theory behind the behavior. And he broke it down into 3 basic categories, and I'm using some notes to be able to help with this, so excuse me if I'm slightly looking to one side. But what he basically explained was that people overestimate their own motivation when trying to change behavior. So I found that a fascinating thing, because I always thought, oh, my motivation will stay and it will stick, and because I am good enough to be able to do that. But the truth is that willpower alone only takes you so far, and you need that helping hand, and I totally empathize, and I totally get that first principle. So what he explains is that when motivation may work for one-off behaviors or actions, it's not great over a longer period of time, or as what he explains it as sustainable change, i.e. where that habit turns into a routine. And as a result, then, he explains that such change is likely to come about by designing small habits that make your desired action as simple and as easy as possible to do. So the example that he gives, going back to it, is when he does the thing that he does probably 5 or 6 times a day, depending on how strong or weak your bladder is, I guess, he then will do the 2 push-ups, or press-ups rather, it might be. And so what he then explained basically was that what you need to do is hook on the thing that you want to do to the thing that you already do. And I really like that, actually, in the end, which is, maybe it's like when I drink my first cup of coffee in the morning, I will read 2 articles, or maybe when I go to the toilet, I will do this, or maybe after I've had my breakfast, I will do this, or whatever else it might be. And I found that a really fascinating way of that being the trigger, in a way. And to be fair, when I go to the toilet quite a lot now, at home, I do actually do push-ups, because actually I've got into quite a habit of doing that now. So I quite liked that as quite a practical example of how you can then change a habit into a routine, because your body and your brain becomes more autonomized, or whatever the exact phrase is. It becomes more automatic, and it becomes more autonomous then, as a result.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think as well, like, it doesn't have to be, as you said, in your work life. It can just be in your daily life as it is. And going back to lockdown, I mean, I was very much one of those people who did like PE with Joe, and it then became part of my routine, and I genuinely did, bar I think one. I did every single live workout that he ever did. So I think there were 70 or 80 workouts over how many weeks it was. And I made myself, well, I don't know, I didn't make myself do it. I wanted to do it every day, and I knew it was at 9 o'clock this day or whatever time. And I just did it every single day, and I got up and I felt great, and it felt part of my routine. Now I know that was just for me, but that might not work for somebody else. But then I just incorporated that, but that wasn't something I did, this time, well, last year or whenever it was. It was something new that I started, and I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And then after 1 session or 2 sessions, I thought, oh, I actually quite like doing this. But before you've got to try things before you know if you're actually going to stick with it or not. And if you don't want to stick with it, well, just try something else. I mean, HIIT workouts or any sort of YouTube workout aren't for anyone. Sometimes people prefer going out for a 5K run, or they prefer going outside or whatever else, and maybe that works best for them. But you can just deviate from, so that obviously the main thing was exercise, but I just prefer doing it as a HIIT workout. But there's other means to do it. So actually, if journaling in a way doesn't actually work for you, there's other things that you can do as well. So it doesn't have to be that. But talking of journaling, actually, as well, at the start of COVID, I started a journal, an actual COVID diary, and I didn't think at the time that it would last for particularly long, but actually, would you believe I actually wrote it for 500 days? So every single day for COVID. So it started on March the 17th, 2020. And I actually just finished it. 500 was the 29th of July, I think. But yeah, and I wrote in that every single day, without fail. It was an absolute habit that I absolutely, definitely had to do it every day. I'd come so far after, especially getting to 100 or 200 or 300 or 400, and then I stopped at day 500, and I genuinely did, like, wrote in a diary for 500 days. And it took probably 5 or 10 minutes out of my day. But actually now, and I've not done it yet, but I probably will. Well, I'll go back and look through it and see what I wrote at that time, and I'm sure it'll be maybe not such a nice reminder, but it'll be helpful to see, you know, how things were at that time a year ago. But that's certainly something that I didn't expect I would ever have done. And then I started it, and then I quite enjoyed doing it, and it was a part of a motivation that I had to do every single day, and then I continued it for 500 days.
Very cool. Well, that's a great routine, I think, basically, and yeah, very impressive. And I think on that point, really welcome everyone else's thoughts on this as well, because it'd be great to yeah, have some questions as they come up. That's almost that stage, isn't it, now, where if you can do those small changes consistently, compounded over a particular period of time, that habit then becomes that routine, which becomes, I think, a bit more straightforward and something that becomes more of your identity. It becomes something that you feel you can then tell other people about, which is, yeah, I want to get into this industry. I'm reading really interesting stuff here. Have you listened to this person talk about this particular area? Has this sprung to mind? And, you know, I think sometimes when it becomes more of your identity, then people remember that that's the thing that you're interested in more about as well. So, you know, I was giving some thought to it as well, which is, you know, as well as obviously sometimes you being the person that's telling other people, really interested in this, really interested in that, when you're telling that you're those nearest and dearest to you about it, I think as well, they almost become your advocates, I think, sometimes as well. I know my wife does it brilliantly for me in telling everyone about, you know, my book stuff or my work that I do or the other stuff that I'm interested in or the charity fashion brand or whatever. I think that's sometimes a very underutilized resource, which can be, you know, within reason, and so long as they want to hear from you on different areas, is just share your passion and your particular areas of interest with others so that they can then almost amplify when they're speaking to people about what you can do and the people that you know, etc.
Yeah, well, because you never know, if you speak to somebody, they might know somebody else. For example, if you spoke to your parents or your wife or your husband, whatever, they might have a colleague who knows somebody else, and there's so many links that could come from this. But actually, if you don't say anything, you'll never know. So it may very well come to something, or it may very well come to nothing. But actually putting yourself out there, or even getting friends or family to read any blogs that you know want to like publish or anything like that, like just making sure people know that you've got an interest in the area. And some people really won't care, actually really will not care that you've got this interest in sport because it doesn't interest them, and that's absolutely fine. Like, not everyone's going to like everything that you want to do, and that's completely normal. Like, that life would be boring if everyone liked the same thing. But actually there'll be a few people who genuinely do have an interest in what you want to say or what you want to write, and use those people because they'll be happy to help in any way. And I think yeah, that's important too. But go back to the routines of like habits, routines, and opportunity. I think this whole DG community, as it is, wouldn't have happened. I mean, it must have been about 5 or 6 years ago now. I reached out to Dan in so many ways to kind of ask for a bit of advice or help, just the standard kind of student to someone in that area can give me a bit of advice kind of thing. And then over the years, actually, it didn't so much become a routine, but Dan and I just kept in contact, and we kind of knew what each other was getting up to and whatnot. Then actually, because of that, we spoke about our journeys or whatnot. This opportunity actually arose based on our previous experiences between like Dan and I's journeys together. So actually, if Dan and I hadn't spoken, this would not be a thing at all. And that goes to show that sometimes things take 5 or 6 years. It's not something that can happen overnight or within a couple of months. But little things every day will then help you get on something else to get onto something else. Yeah.
Well, then also the thing I think is really important to note as well, Jodie, that you were talking about when we were preparing for this was you go from the routine of us doing this hopefully now on a constant basis to then the people reaching out to you on LinkedIn or across social media or various places to say, thanks for this, or I've got a question on that, or can you offer some guidance or some wisdom or advice, etc. The thing that I really like about that approach is, in a way, what starts off as something, as us talking about it, leads to us doing, and then leads to more opportunities and connections. So I think there's something in for us and for you as well, in truth, the putting yourself out there, being a little bit out of your comfort zone, which I know you have been, and that's to be commended for doing this with me, which is great. But also then the opportunities that arise to connect with other people as a result of what you're doing. And that's the bit that I think then offers a lot, because, you mix knowledge building with growing relationships and your network, and soon you're doing lots of different things at the same time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and it's bizarre for me to be kind of doing something like this, because only maybe a couple of years ago it was genuinely me who was, asking other people questions or guidance or whatnot. But that's actually why Dan and I thought it was a good idea to do this, because we could kind of impart our own knowledge about the steps that we've kind of both taken. And I know, especially from my own experience, that it's always really daunting to come onto webinars when we've got a partner or a senior partner in a law firm, and actually sometimes it's nice to have someone at the opposite end of the scale, like a junior lawyer like myself, who's kind of been through a bit of rejection and difficulties with lockdown and whatever else, and kind of how you overcome it, because it's not a straight road. There's plenty obstacles in the way. I mean, Dan's had everyone's had many in their careers, up and downs and whatever else, but yeah, doing something like this is so far out my comfort zone. I mean, it might not come across it, but I don't like speaking in front of people. So yeah, it's really daunting. But then on the back of that, I have had a number of LinkedIn conversations or Zoom calls with people who have tuned in and who are wanting a bit of advice, or even just to read a blog or read a cover letter or something like that. And actually, because people had helped me in my time of need, I'm so always more than happy to help if I have the time to help other people. And it just was a really full circle moment for me, actually.
And so if we then sort of evolve from that, which is, it fits neatly into two of the points I think you've made, Jodie, which are really interesting ones around, creating more opportunities through what we're doing now, but at the same time playing the long game. And I think that's like the really important key, is almost like, that patience element to it, which is what you've really got to do. I think, in my experience, I definitely feel it, and I know in a lot of the work that you've done, is, put in that invisible work, is the truth. Put in those knowledge hours, start building relationships, but sort of at the same time depressurize yourself not to think, what, if it doesn't happen in the next 6 months or 9 months, then it's never going to happen, it's never going to work. I've done everything I can. Usually, in my experience, and from speaking to a lot of other people, the one thing that is usually out of a person's control is timing, and is all of the other variables. It might be someone's not recruiting. It might be someone else was slightly better or came across better in an interview. It might be you made one typo in a CV, which cost you the chance to have that interview. It might be that the industry is going through a particular rocky phase, or vice versa. Or it might be that you're more junior or too senior for a particular role, or the rest of it. And so what I mean by that is, you've got to be open to the opportunity when it arises, but not too much put pressure on yourself that if the opportunity doesn't rise quickly, then it's all over for you, is the truth. And that's, I think, that sort of fait accompli rationale, which I think people need to feel more comfortable with, which is play the long game a little bit more, and you depressurize yourself by, you might not be doing the exact job that you want to for a particular period of time, but there will always be loads of particular skills that you will be learning, evolving on, picking up good habits, hopefully less picking up bad habits on particular people from particular people. But as a result, it's what I think a lot of people call is like, you stretch your opportunity window. You stretch the window so that it might not be in the short term that you find something, but in the medium to long term, if you're building that knowledge, if you're reaching out to more people, if you're networking in the right way, if you're able to speak your mind and articulate stuff and deal with detailed, interesting issues, mixed with a growing skill set in whichever area you might be in, you then de-risk and stretch your window so that then when the right types of opportunities come, you can then go full force into them, knowing it's not the end of the world if it doesn't happen for you right now, But if it does, then great, and it's a bonus. Otherwise, sometimes I think people put too much pressure on themselves to be like, if it doesn't happen now, then forget about it. When actually, it's probably less about you, the person, and more about everything else that can happen that's not necessarily within your control.
Yeah, no, I agree, and sometimes it's also not the pressure that you put yourself under, because I think people naturally put themselves under a bit of pressure anyway. But sometimes it's people from your family, friends. You know, you said you're going to do this, it's not happening. When will it happen? When will it ever happen? And then when it doesn't happen for a long time, they then almost put a bit of doubt in your head that it never will happen. But I think in my own experience, as long as you don't, let that kind of ambition or goal go, like you'll always get there. I don't think anything is out of reach that you almost want to do, but you just have to put in, actually, that play the long game, and do things that take time, and it might take months or it might take years, but yeah, you will get there. And I think if you take steps to do things every day or every other day to enhance your skill set, your network, it can only but be good things and bring good things for you.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so I think then, just recapping what we've talked about for today, I think what I'm really keen on trying to articulate is, not some just big theory about you've got to do a habit and then you've got to find a routine and then those opportunities will come. It's almost like, think about the particular, very, very specific thing that you can do on a day-to-day basis that ideally you can write in a journal, that you can track, that then gives you ideas of the things that interest you more. Because ultimately what you're looking for is, to basically find those areas of curiosity in whichever industry it might be. For us, it's been sport. For me, it's been football as well, but for whatever industry that might be. And then by slowly evolving your knowledge base, and by then being able to articulate ideas to others that are interested in hearing, and to more broadly other people, and then starting to build a network and relationships into the types of sectors you're interested in doing. And then that creating opportunities, because people are thinking, oh, she knows what she's talking about, he knows something of interest there, he's read that case, or she's done that really interesting blog on that particular topic. Things start very, very slowly falling into place. And all of that, in my mind, should give that person like tangible confidence that they're doing things in the right way. I'm not saying that for every single person that dream job is going to be there, because there is no such thing as a dream job in truth. There's always times in my line of work, I'm sure it's the same with you, Jodie, it's like, this is tough, or this is a bit of a rubbish day, or this is hard work, or whatever it might be. But the point I'm trying to get to more generally is, it might be that for a while it's something that's not the main part of your life, but can still be a significant focus of your life because it's the thing that you're interested in doing. And whether it's something you do as a side hustle, like my fashion brand, I know I'm not going to be a fashion designer forever. That's not, I know I'm not going to do that. Jodie, why are you laughing? That's a question I need to ask. But, at the same time, I identify myself as a lawyer, as someone who provides content as an author, but someone that loves doing these sorts of self-development, helping, talks alongside yourself. And so it's starting very small and just slowly and surely building that foundation. By doing that, in my experience, and then working with yourself, Jodie, and lots of other people that have gone through that process, you gain confidence then that you put the legwork in, rather than thinking instantly, I want to be this. And if it doesn't happen shortly, then it's my fault, or worse, it's someone else's fault that hasn't given me the opportunity. And by, being pretty honest with yourself, I think, and being pretty aware of whether you are actually doing the things that you want to do, identifying yourself as whatever you want to identify yourself, and actually putting those habits in place. I found that by doing those relatively straightforward things over a longer period of time, people are much happier with the things that they're doing, because ultimately they're moving themselves slightly in a better trajectory of what they want to do longer term.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it doesn't even have to be, I know we've spoken a lot about the knowledge journal, but that is what one thing. But another thing for me when I was doing networking, when I set myself a target, I'll connect with 5 people today and see what happens, and see if I can get a connection, or see if I can get a bit of advice. And some days or some weeks I got no replies, some days I got a couple of replies, But actually, if you didn't send that message in the first place, you were never going to get any reply. So I think you've got to be realistic as well, that people are busy, I guess, and people might not see these LinkedIn messages for a while, but on the off chance that somebody does, then great. And it might just be at that time where they're actually needing somebody in the office, or they're needing a junior to come in and help out, or a placement, or anything. You just never know. And I mean, I am very much not a firm believer, but I do sometimes think what's for you won't go by you, whether that's in 1 year or whether that's in 5 years. Like, I just think opportunities do present themselves. But I think if you help yourself by putting yourself in the best light, i.e., making efforts to reach your goal, I think people would be naive to think that the goal will come to them. I think you actually have to physically take steps, take actions to reach that goal. And well, that's in my own experience. I mean, I know for a fact if I hadn't done any of the things that I've done over the past kind of 2 or 3 years, I 100% would not be sitting here right now speaking on this kind of forum, without a doubt. So I think actually over the years, I think by looking back and seeing what you did, because actually when you're going through a process of doing habits or doing routine, sometimes you don't take stock of what you do. And I remember, Dan, you saying to me when I got the job at Manchester, you said to me, I really hope you sit down and you think about how far you've come and what you've done throughout this process. And to be honest, I didn't really think I'd done that much at all. I just very much was quite keen and quite motivated and resilient to keep going. But actually, when I thought about it and sat down, like I done quite a lot. But when you're going through it, you just don't think about it. You just push on and power on, and then it's only maybe a couple of years later you realize, wow, I did quite a lot. So yeah, I don't think you should put any pressure on yourself whatsoever. But doing something, as I will say, doing 1% is better than 0%. If you do, if you read 5 pages a day rather than 0, or if you go for a walk for 10 minutes rather than not going out at all, these things are all benefiting you. And yeah, in the long term, I think it definitely will be of benefit.
Jodie, great stuff as always chatting to you. I think we're more or less there if there aren't any more questions, but I'm not sure if there's any particular thing you want to mention just on DG community stuff, or when we're doing our next one, or how we're going to do it. We probably haven't talked about it ourselves yet, to be fair.
No, I know. I think the next one will be at the end of September, so either the 29th or 30th, but I'll confirm and share on platforms when I know. But otherwise, if anyone who's not a member of the DG community on LinkedIn, please just request to join, and Dan and I will, of course, accept you into that. And we share quite a lot of articles in there. So again, if anyone wants to post anything that they're up to, or anything that they've seen that's interesting, and actually off of the Knowledge Journal, I mean, in a way, the DG community on LinkedIn could be a good resource for you, because actually, I think there's over 250 or 300 members or whatever. So if 100 people posted articles, every couple of weeks or whatever, all your resources will be there. And of course, not every article will interest you, absolutely not, because that people have different interests. But actually, it's a good source to look at. So I would encourage everyone to post some articles, or just even thoughts about what's going on in the sports or entertainment industries, to kind of generate conversation as well. And if anyone wants to have a specific kind of chat about what we can discuss next month, always feel free to just send me a LinkedIn message, or Dan as well, and we can see what we can do. But yeah, thanks very much for listening. As ever, we really appreciate the support that we get from everyone. And yeah, if you want to take any information and share it amongst your peers or friends or whatnot, and get them to join in the next time, that would also be great.
Thanks, Jodie.
Thanks, Dan.